So normally we have some crazy intro at the beginning with a lot of music and just gets you hyped up, but it didn't really feel appropriate today. As everybody I think knows, Kobe Bryant passed away, as did his daughter Gigi, and all the other passengers aboard as well. And I don't. It's hard to explain. I grew up in LA, and it's really hard to explain just how much Kobe really united Los Angeles in a lot of ways. And throughout this whole thing, I've had friends. My brother was bawling yesterday, and it's funny because on one hand, you're like, how can this person that none of us knew make us feel like this? And I think that one of I have two things to say, but one thing I have to say, I think, is to all the people I guess that listen to this that are from LA or might be extremely sad from the Kobe situation. Feel it. It's okay. You're not wrong for feeling sad. It's not crazy. This dude occupied. I have a friend who, with her family, watched every single game. The dude occupied your TV screen every other night. That matters. Those are memories. That's important. He did impact people. And I guess the second thing is what I'm gonna take away from Kobe. He was an amazing athlete, and of course there are marks on his personality, but and his life, but the stories coming out from other athletes and other people of how he reached out and would check in on them constantly. Naomi Osaka, who is so young and he didn't have to do anything. He would text her and ask her if she's okay after games. You see PK Subban saying he gave him the light of day, telling him how to prepare for the Stanley Cup. Um, Novak Djokovic said he was a mentor. He helped Marquise Brownlee, who's a YouTuber, get through an interview because he was so nervous, and instead of being angry, coached him through it. He was he was clearly in it to make other people feel better, and I think that that's my big takeaway from it. I texted. I spent an hour today and yesterday just texting a bunch of friends that I knew that loved Kobe and just saying, "Hey, I hope you're all right." And I think we can all do that. We can all check in a little bit more and remember that nothing is given the next day. We don't know who's going to be here the next day, and just check in. Tell people you love them. Tell people that they care, that you care, that they matter to you, because you never know when someone might be gone too soon, and yeah, it's not easy. So what we're gonna do here for him, we're gonna do kind of what everyone else has kind of been doing in games and such, and we're just a podcast. But if anything, we're just a fantasy podcast and we're just hockey. But if Kobe's legacy taught us anything, it doesn't matter how small you are, you can always have an impact on people, and what you do matters. So we're going to do a little 24-second minute. Oh, that's not a minute, but a 24-second moment of silence for him here. So. And that's the 24 seconds. So I kind of need a little second. So you want to go first into your unsustainably high and get the episode going?
Sure. I haven't said anything
Yeah.
yet, so that's probably a good time for me to
No,
start saying stuff.
absolutely.
My first one, and this is funny because it's going to prompt a response from you, so too bad for your minute that you need, is Chris Kreider. Left wing 64% over on your New York Rangers. Now, Kreider, I think we've talked about him quite a bit so far. He's showed up, if you listen to the special, he showed up on the special. He's a likely, and if not guaranteed, trade figure. He's extremely likely to be dealt before the trade deadline. Meaning, for fantasy playoffs, we have no idea where he's going to be. Now, you look at what's been going on with him this season. He's been really good this season. And by really good, I mean completely the same as last season, a 55-point player. But over the last month, he's been pretty good. He's benefiting from an increased shooting percentage. His on-ice shooting percentage is actually in line, and his IPP is his traditional not very good of being 50 to 55%. The thing is, he's been shooting a lot more recently, a lot more. And he's been seeing a little bit of increased ice time, which has been helping him. Couple that with a little bit of increased power play time, and you find yourself with a pretty good player in the short term. Benefiting a little bit, Kreider's never been the type to be averaging 4 shots a game, which is where he's been lately. That's like McKinnon style. It's not Kreider's game. So to expect that to continue, even if he does for whatever reason stay on the Rangers, is a little bit optimistic. So Kreider, considering how good he's been for so long now, is one of my biggest sell high candidates. I have him in a couple of leagues, maybe just the one, but I've been trying to shop him around, as I think there are teams out there that really like the idea that he may be moved and will have kind of greater expectations for what could happen if he winds up on, Edmonton, right? I am not the type of player, if you know anything about me, I'm not the type of player that likes to take big risks like that. I don't want to trade for a player that I expect to be moved, because you don't know where he's going. Every single season, the move that we expect a team to make is not the move that is made. So he could wind up really anywhere, or he could, including New York still. So if you're going to trade for Kreider, do it cheaply. If you're going to sell Kreider,
Or simply don't.
do it as expensively as you can. That's my take on Chris
Just
Kreider.
don't buy. Oh, I thought you meant trade for. Yeah, don't trade for Kreider. Trade Kreider away.
Yes.
He is unsustainably high, and like Brandon said, anytime you have a player who you pretty much know is going to get traded, in that situation, you normally want to move away from that player, especially a guy like Kreider, who ultimately is, like we said on the special, someone who's a depth guy. Speaking of depth guys, my next guy here is a depth guy on the Florida Panthers, Frank Vetrano, left wing, right wing, 26%, a lot of hype. Only 50 minutes a game at the moment, 50% shooting over the last 4 games, 25% over his last 13 games. So that's certainly not going to stick. On top of that, his shots are pretty low, so he's benefiting from the points department a lot from the goals. His IPP is also crazy inflated, as is his on-ice shooting percentage. So he's about as unsustainable as he gets. So sure, he might be a fine short-term ad in the moment, but there's really nothing long-term here.
Yep, I agree. My next one's staying in Florida, but not on the team Florida, which is interesting when you think about it. The other Florida team that's not called Florida, in Tampa Bay, this is probably not going to come as a surprise, as I've been hinting that he's going to be on this for a while now, is Anthony Cirelli. He has been pretty good this season. He's floating at a 60-point pace, but we saw the majority of that come from his time playing with Stamkos, which has ended. Right now, he's riding a 17.5 on-ice shooting percentage, which is way higher than it will ever be for him for a season, and higher than it'll be for just about anybody. So realistically, I think the ceiling for Anthony Cirelli for a on-ice shooting percentage, if he does not have Stamkos on his line, is probably like 11%, maybe 12 if he had a fantastic season. So without that, funny thing is, Stamkos gets moved off of his line. He gets a hat trick. Awesome. Couple this with the fact that he's playing with 17% of the teams. I'm doing it again with a couple. I'm doing it again. I'll stop. He's getting 17% of the team's power play deployment, which is trash. I don't see any of this keeping up. He's not a big shooter by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, he's just not a big peripheral guy in general. There's just nothing there for him in just at all. He's like a hit a game guy, so he's got, I guess you can give him that. But when you look at the fact that he gets no shots to really back it up, there's not a lot to like here. He's 24% owned, so I feel like the word hasn't really gotten too far out on him anyway. But I would suspect if he gets another point or two in his next appearance, which is actually happening right now. I haven't paid attention if he's gotten a point, but I assume if he does, that we're going to see him blow up. Speaking of blowing up, Rasmus Sandin so far has 2 points tonight, which is going to be awesome. I'm sure he's going to get added 6,000 times by everybody and be like 80% owned or something by tomorrow.
Yeah, gotta love it. Okay, so my next guy here is Zach Parise. Left wing, 28% owned. We've talked about him before in the past. And yeah, a lot of people are kind of excited about him, thinking he might be making a comeback, but there's a few things that I want to warn you about. His minutes are still low. That's a big thing. His shot pace is actually healthy, so I'll credit him that. He's shooting quite a bit, and it looks really healthy. The thing is, his shooting percentage is at 18% over his last game, so he's benefiting a lot from there. But there's something he's benefiting from even more, and that is the power play. And right now, if you look at those last 11 games for Zach Parise, where he has this 18% shooting, 6 of his 8 points over that span are on the power play. And so you're looking at a guy who, without that power play production, which is pretty unsustainable for if you look at that stretch for the Minnesota Wild there's no points. And so Zach Parise is a guy right now that is fully relying on the power play, and as soon as that power play cools off, you're going to see him cool off.
Yep. I do like Parise, but not as a long term hold, really.
Yeah.
He's always a good streamer
No,
option.
same.
My last one here is he's only 7% owned, so this is not like a big problem or anything, but is Justin Williams. He came back to the Canes after certainly looking like he was going to retire, and immediately jumped up to 7%, which was interesting. I guess people are hyped about him because he was reasonably decent last season, and he came out, scoring again somehow and actually shooting pretty well and doing all this fun things. But realistically, we're talking about a player who's sitting on the fourth line and getting fourth line minutes. He's getting 11 to 12 minutes a game. That could change, but I don't really want to sit here and assume it will. The shot pace is astronomical. The fact that he's able to have, 8 shots even in just 2 games, considering the number of the amount of ice time he's getting, is pretty ridiculous. Even despite his offensive zone deployment, which is pretty high. This just screams to me Patrick Marleau. It's like the same thing, where he came out pretty well because he came with a chip on his shoulder, right? Like he decided he wanted to play for Carolina. They're like, yeah, come back, and he's going to play a little hard, at least to start with. Same thing Marleau did, and then he's just going to fade into obscurity, I think. So cool to see him back. Not fantasy relevant, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And another guy who's kind of become fantasy relevant, I guess he wasn't, now he is, but maybe a little bit too fantasy relevant, and that's Blake Coleman, left wing, right wing, 59% owned. That guy that Roto World at one point said not ownable in any format? Yeah, that guy. So there's 2 interesting things. So one negative is that he doesn't play the power play at all. So, of course, that's a big negative to him. And on top of that, he plays very, very defensive minutes, as we've talked about with Blake Coleman in the past. He's largely a defensive player. And so when you take a look at his points, if you look at his last 11 games, he has 8 points. Fantastic, right? Awesome. He's getting 8 points in his last 11 games. That's a great pace. There's one issue, though. Every single one of those points are goals. Every single one. And he's shooting at 16% over those last 11 games. So there's a lot of unsustainability there. And when you look at where Blake Coleman is getting his points from, and because he's a defensive player, a lot of those goals come on rushes, odd man rushes, or stealing the puck and countering pretty quickly. And that can happen, but it's happening a little bit just too much. And on top of that, it makes sense that he doesn't have many assists, because at the end of the day, he starts in the defensive zone and spends a lot of time in the defensive zone. I mean, he doesn't have power play time, so there's just not as many assists or goals in general to get in on, unless he's the one scoring them. Should he be getting more assists? Probably. But is it enough to matter? No. So in my opinion, like we said on the special, Blake Coleman is absolutely a sell high candidate. But on top of that, he's also a guy who, if you can't sell, you want to have a short leash with him if you're in a points league, especially. If you're in a points league, especially, you have to have the shortest of leash with Blake Coleman, because again, like I said, this is all right now. All of his relevancy over these last 11 games, which have been fantastic, have come solely from goals and an inflated shooting percentage.
Yep, I agree. Not really much to add to him, actually. So
Yeah.
let's move on to Unsustainably Low.
Let's do it. I forgot that you had to start that off. Go for it.
Yeah. My first one is Mika Rantanen, right wing, 99%. As we mentioned in the playoff episode, he's one of my favorite targets for trading right now. Really good playoff schedule for most leagues. Slumping lately, but it's starting to come back around, which is nice. I think you can throw Landeskog in here as well, although I just decided to pick Rantanen for this. Everything looks normal is the good thing. There's nothing that I can point at to say Rantanen should be bad. The only thing that's even a knock compared to last season is that he's skating about a minute less. They're skating him almost 21 minutes a game last season. This season they're skating him more like 19 to 20. Really shouldn't make that much of a difference. So I think that he's, like I said, a great target. I think that we're going to see a lot of the points come back that we were expecting, and that this slump is going to end soon if it hasn't already.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of somewhat similar, Victor Hedman, defenseman 100% owned, obviously. I don't think anyone's dropping Victor Hedman. But I have seen a lot of, as we get Unsustainable is a very interesting episode as we get closer to the trade deadline because you tend to talk about guys that are like 100%, and we're no longer talking about unsustainably low in the thought of you maybe dropping them. That's not really what's even on anyone's mind, right? Like, that's not what anyone's thinking about. No one's really thinking, oh, I might drop Victor Hedman. Instead, what people are thinking is, oh, well, maybe he's slumping and I need to trade him. That's really what we talk about more in terms of, same with Landeskog, Rotten, and that kind of thing. And so when it comes to Victor Hedman, he's still on a 73-point pace on the season. So don't forget that. He's still fine. But it's these last few games that are really frustrating. Over the last 13 games, he has 0% shooting. He's normally like a 6% shooter. So that's one area to come up. His IPP is also crazy low over the last 13 games. So he should be getting in on more points than he has been, while the on-ice shooting percentage is fine. And so he's just not getting in on as many points as he was before. And I expect that to turn around. His minutes are still super high, actually higher over the last 13 games than they are across the whole season on an average basis. So I fully expect Victor Hedman to turn it around. And I mean, if there's someone out there that is serious about maybe moving Hedman and is really frustrated with his last 13 games, I'd absolutely be buying.
Yep. In that same vein, my next one is Patrice Bergeron, center 99%. Bergeron is still having a pretty good season, but he is somehow managing to avoid a lot of points in a way that he shouldn't be. He last season was at 69% IPP. That's about where I expect him. He's an elite center. He should be around 70%. This season, he's at 53%, and he's still doing as well as he is. So that's just the Boston top line for you. Despite being, I mean, he's not quite point per game, but he's right there, 41 and 42. Despite being that close to point per game, he is missing significant point totals here. Significant, which is crazy. He should probably be, closer to his line mates in point pace. There's not anything on here that shows me a reason why he shouldn't be other than this IPP, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Obviously, his power play deployment is going to be as good as his line mates in Pastrnak and Marchand. His shot totals are as good, if not better, than we expect from him. He's on a 293 shot pace, which is significantly higher, actually, than last season where he shot about 260. So really, he's technically playing better right now than he did last season and just managing not to get in on the points.
Yep. Similar sort of, I guess. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in detail with a player that I have on Sustainably Low, so I'm not going to go into it too much, but I want to talk about Tomas Hertl here, center left wing, 76%. Really solid minutes, but just nothing to show for it as of late. And I know you had him as a buy low target, I think largely because of the minutes, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
What's killing him is on-ice shooting percentage. That's kind of the story of the Sharks. His shot pace is up. He's still on a 62-point pace on the season. The issue is really just the Sharks have a low on-ice shooting percentage and low goal totals. And they don't really shoot that much either. They don't control shot share. They don't really get that many shots in general, or attempts in general. So there's just inherently less for him to get in on. And so I still see him as a sustainably low candidate, ignoring like a trade situation, like just as he should be doing better, in my opinion. I do think Tomas Hertl should absolutely be doing better than he is right now. Everything on paper seems to say, yes, he should be doing better. That's why he's on sustainably low. Do I think he's going to really turn it around? I don't know. That's kind of the issue with the Sharks in general for me. Any single one is, the question is not, do they turn it around? It's, if they turn it around, does it even matter? That's the big issue.
Yeah. I think Hertl's in the best position to be able to benefit. That's my deal with him on the Sharks. But
yeah, agreed.
Okay, my last one here is Patrick Hornquist, right wing, 51%. This is assuming he gets to have some Crosby time or even some Malkin time, whichever one, with Simone and Cahoon out, or seemingly out. That's about as good a deployment as he can get. He's always been a decent shooter, pretty good shooter, and a pretty good hitter. So even if he's not getting you points, he's getting you peripherals in Cats leagues. He's worth something. In points leagues, you got to hope that he clicks. I mean, how could you not click with Crosby? But worth a flyer over there. And, if he gets bumped back down to the third line, which I think will happen at some point, you can look to cut ties. But 51% for what he's doing and his deployment seems a little low to me in standard leagues.
So my next guy here, We talked about him a little bit on the trade special. I tend to have a lot of guys from the trade special, I guess, on this. Not entirely what I intended, but it's how it's worked out. So there you go. Brock Besser, right wing, 94%. It's kind of nice to be able to deep dive a little bit more into these players that we talked about already. But minutes have really dipped, and that's what's hurting him quite a bit. The shot pace is still ridiculously high for him, so he's still shooting a lot, which is good to see. The thing that is a little concerning, and we talked about this, I don't remember if it was a holiday special or if it was like on a weekend preview where we were talking about different topics. His power play percentage is still really high, but his power play points have dried up almost entirely. He has 0 in his last 11 games. And if you remember when we were talking about the Pedersens, the Quinn Hughes, and the Brock Bessers of the world, one of the issues was they were extremely heavily reliant on those power play points because their power play was producing at such a ridiculous rate, right? And so when it comes to a guy like Brock Besser, that's where he's really hurting right now is those power play points. So is he going to get those back? I don't know. But the other thing that's important to remember with Brock Besser is he's also getting lower minutes and he's off of that top line. And as Brandon so succinctly put it last time, what was it? It was reunification or something like that.
I'm not even saying it again.
What did you say again? Reunition. That's what he said. Once they reunition Brock Besser, Elias Pettersson, and JT Miller, once they reunite him, he should see a big resurgence. And I do think, like I said on the special, I do think they'll reunite him. So I absolutely think he's a sustainably low candidate.
Yep. Okay. Shall we move into sustainably high candidates?
Yeah. I'm shocked we haven't overlapped at all yet.
Yeah.
Very surprised. I thought this episode we'd have a lot of overlap.
I don't think we're going to overlap on this one either, but we'll see. My
Okay,
first one is Rasmus Ristolainen, defenseman, 84%.
Yeah, definitely not overlapping.
Yep. What is interesting with Risto, and Risto, honestly, he's always been a Bangers League player, and he, is still doing that stuff. Okay block totals, excellent hit pace. The PIMs are there. He's Ristolainen. That's what he does. But he's usually good for about 45 points. 40 to 45 points is like his wheelhouse. This season he's tracking at 38, which makes sense because he hasn't been on power play 1. But what has happened recently is he has been moved to power play 1. And what I wouldn't have put him on here because I would have expected that he would get bumped off at some point, but it's been kind of working. And Skinner came back and did not bump him off of power play 1, which means he didn't even bump Johansson off power play 1. So with Olofsson coming back, what I expect to happen is Ristolainen stays there, plays the wall, and we see Dahlin continue to be quarterback, and we see Olofsson slot back in, and that's just it. I don't think necessarily that means it's going to bump Risto down. Buffalo has so many offensive defensemen. They've got Montour hanging out. They've got Colin Miller hanging out. They've got Yogi Haru around. They've got all these other quarterbacks, essentially, that they can use Risto for essentially playing him as a forward on the power play unit. I think they will continue to do that until it stops working. So with that in mind, I think we'll see him get right back to his 45-point pace or so and continue doing his goofy Risto stuff, which is always great for Cats leagues.
That's sort of interesting. I don't entirely disagree, actually, as much as I thought I would with that.
Skinner, I wouldn't have said anything until Skinner came back. I think Skinner was like the
Right.
litmus test.
Yeah.
If Skinner was going to bump somebody off, then I would have been like, Even if it wasn't Risto, if Skinner had bumped off Johansson, I would have been like, Olofsson's either bumping off Skinner or he's bumping off Risto. So, but
yeah,
I could pretty much say I would be very surprised if it's not Johansson that gets bumped off when Olofsson comes back.
Interesting. Yeah, I can get behind that. My next one here is Dylan Larkin, someone we obviously really liked at the beginning of the season, just hasn't really panned out. Center, 71% owned. Minutes are still really high. That's a positive. Shot pace is low, but the reason for that is not necessarily Dylan Larkin. The reason for that is more so that Detroit isn't generating many shot opportunities and doesn't really put him in a position to generate shot opportunities because Detroit sucks. And that's just
so angry.
The truth of the matter. Dude, Detroit sucks. They're so bad. How did they manage to make Larkin not ownable in many leagues? That takes skill.
Mm-hmm.
It takes like legitimate skill to make Larkin that bad, I feel, especially from a fantasy perspective. So shooting percentage is high over the last 30 days, but he's actually fine on the season. He's actually at around 8.5% right now. Last year, he shot at 11.5%. So there's a little bit of positive regression at the moment going on, but he actually still has room to kind of get better. I could absolutely see Larkin being a 75 plus pace guy rest of season if he can figure it out. He's a
Yep.
really interesting trade candidate if you believe in him,
Yep.
because I think people will still sell low. They're going to think, oh, well, he's just doing well. Finally, I can get rid of Larkin. When really you're getting Larkin at hopefully he can, if you believe he can turn it around right here and start to produce, which he's been pretty consistent for a while now. If you look back at his last 30 days and a little bit past that, it's been a hot minute now since he's been good. He's really turned it around and been pretty consistent. So I'm hoping that he's seen a big resurgence here. And one thing that has really turned it around for him is his IPP. It's finally high, and the on-ice shooting percentage makes sense. One of his big issues all season, if you go back and watch the original Bust Watch video on Dylan Larkin, one of the things that I brought up that was so concerning was that he was getting a ridiculously low IPP. He's normally like a 75 to 80% IPP guy on the wings. And this year he was sitting more in the 55 to 60% range, which is ridiculously low compared to what he used to do. And now it's coming back up to that 75 to 80 range. And that's what you want to see from him. And if that's the case, and if that continues, then I absolutely buy into him doing this. And if you look at his last 30 days, his IPP has been in that range. So I buy that this is a sustainably high Dylan Larkin now.
Yep. Can't disagree. My next one, and I feel like this is a player that doesn't really get talked about enough. He might be flying in as, he might be the single most underrated fantasy asset this season. Now, the more I'm thinking about it, I feel like we haven't talked about him enough, and that's Kyle Connor.
Yeah,
we have mentioned him a few times in that, like, saying things like you got fantastic draft value if you got him. That kind of goes without saying. But we're seeing him be a point per game player, basically. But the thing is, everything that he's doing looks really good from an advanced stats perspective. His shot pace is up significantly. They're playing him in just a stupid amount of minutes. He was playing like 24, 26 minutes in his last few games. Just insane. I don't expect that to keep up, but I wouldn't be surprised if they keep playing him, 20 to 21 as opposed to the 19 from last season. Just a decent bump. Again, like I said, the shot pace is up. I think the shooting percentage is probably a little high. I'm not sure he should be at 25 goals right now, but he backs it up with the 25 assists. So I think that, like, him being in that range makes sense. His on-ice shooting is fine. His IPP, this is where we're seeing this. This is what I really like to see. He was a 55% IPP guy. We're seeing it be 68%, and that, I think you could point to that and say, look, that's a discrepancy. This is why he's unsustainably high. But what I think we're seeing is Kyle Connor's developing into a complete player, and he's going to be in on more points because he's very good. I believe in him, and I believe that this IPP range of 65 to 70, which puts him in, like, not quite elite, but in the upper tiers of forwards, is where we'll see him be for, if not higher, for the rest of his career, or at least the rest of his fantasy relevant career until he starts to taper when he's older.
I don't think I've heard you be so proud of a player in a long time. Like, even Duclair and those players. Wow, you really like Kyle Connor.
I don't own him in any league, so it says something. I don't have a single Kyle Connor
I know.
share.
We do a good job, I think, of not only paying attention to players we own.
Yep.
Normally, I think we do normally a good job, but I think sometimes one fault in us, if I had to pick one of the million, one of them is certainly we don't get as excited about players we don't own.
Yeah.
Normally, and yeah, so that's a very rare opportunity there. That's why I was so taken aback. I was like, wow, you are. I mean, I own Kyle Connor, so yeah. I can be infatuated with him, and I am.
The only thing I want to see with Kyle Connor is him to break out from a power play point perspective. I want to see him get 25 plus.
Yes.
And he's he's trending right where he was last season at about 19 or 20. You'd like to see it be a little higher, but considering everything else that looks so positive, I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, it's going to be hard for him to break out of that on Winnipeg until something changes, because I feel like it's a system thing. It's because of where he plays on that power play, and you have Wheeler and Laine and Scheifele, and Pionk as well. Pionk now coming onto the scene, like, he's kind of the odd man out. I think the fact that he's even in that discussion for near 20 power play point pace is kind of ridiculous, honestly, when you consider just how stacked that power play is and how many power play points you see Wheeler get, or Scheifele and Laine, right? The fact that he's even up there is just insane to me.
Yeah.
Okay, my next one. You're going to love this one. This one's just for you. Just for you. Matthew Barzal. Center, 81% owned. The crazy thing with Matthew Barzal is that he has so much room to improve. So much.
Yeah.
That's the crazy thing with him. So here's a few things. Over the last 13 games, so his last 30 days, he's shooting at only 3%. That's it. Crazy low for him. His on-ice shooting percentage is only 7% over those last 13 games. Way too low. But what's even crazier is that over those last 13 games, he is still on a 70-point pace. Still. And his IPP is in line.
Pretty good.
That's the crazy thing. 3% shooting, 7% on-ice shooting, and you're still on a 70-point pace. That's incredible. That's just phenomenal. That's a good player right there, in my opinion. And so when it comes to Barzal, will he figure it out? I don't know. That's where it's like, okay, will he reach this crazy potential? But can he be a point per game player at times? Absolutely. So in a points league, Matthew Barzal to me is a guy who has right now, a pretty damn good floor. Like a really solid floor for points. If what you're looking for is strictly points, it's a very good floor with very good ceilings. And especially just, he can go, he's had recent games now where he's just gone off at times. So that's the one negative to Barzal, I think, is that he's not as consistent as you'd like. He does tend to kind of have big games and then slow down. But I really, really do like Barzal, and I do think he's in the sustainable, especially with centers. I think a lot of times we question centers, not us, but people in general tend to question centers and think, oh, they might not be sustainable or whatever because they're center. But I think with Matthew Barzal, he's absolutely a center that is entirely sustainably high. Actually, what's funny, I just realized this right now. I probably should have realized this when I was writing my script, but every single one of my sustainably high guys are centers.
Really?
So there's that.
I have a defense, a left wing, and a left wing, right wing.
Oh, wait, you have, how many more do you have?
My last one.
Oh, right. You were set. Okay, never mind. My math was off. Okay, continue.
My last one is Connor Garland.
Yeah, we talked about this offline a little bit.
A little bit. So we've been very, very hesitant on Connor Garland since he ever existed, basically. He's the type of guy that seems to burst in and out kind of. I mean, he and Nick Schmaltz just seem to be attached at the hip as far as when they're going to go off for whatever reason. But Garland never really got any deployment more than like 12 to 13 to 14 minutes. Just he always got trash deployment. He get points and it was not really rewarded. And so people would pick him up because he got on a 3 or 4 game point streak and then he'd just fall off for like 10 straight games. That'll happen when you don't get the ice time. Now what's happening lately is Connor Garland was been promoted. He's been promoted for a while now to that top line with Taylor Hall and Christian Dvorak. Now, what hasn't happened until recently is he has been also promoted and taken over poor old Clayton Keller's top power play spot. This is kind of one of the things I really wanted to see happen with Garland. I wanted to see him get actual power play time. Last season, he played about 45% of the team's power play. This season, up till now, he's been playing about 35%. Not enough to really get anything going. He's been playing over the last week, which obviously is not much of a time scale, but this is when he actually got promoted to that line. He's been playing, about 2/3 of the team's power play, which is typical for a power play 1 unit, and he's got 2 power play points. Sweet. I mean, that's great. The fact that he's getting any probably means that there's not really a reason to switch things up. The longer he does this, the better it is for him, obviously. And we're seeing him skate 17 plus minutes, which is like a first for him. Weirdly enough, the increased minutes haven't translated too much into extra shots, although they are there. I do think that Garland, if given, 17 to 19 minutes a night, we'll see him be a 3+ shot per game player and come up with pretty decent point totals, but the peripherals beyond that are never really going to be there. He's not going to be a big hitter or anything. So that's who you'll get. You'll get a 3-shot a game player, which is great with decent point totals. And I don't know why I think this, but I feel like his shooting percentage is always going to be a little bit above average. I think we're going to see him be a 14, 15% shooter. It just seems to be that he manages to get very good shots on net.
Yeah, he always has. It's kind of been his thing. He used to do. He used to be a guy who at times did a lot with a little.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of excited to see what he does now if he can get a bigger opportunity. And Keller sucks.
Mm-hmm.
So sad. So sad. Okay, my last one here is kind of surprising actually. I didn't think I'd put him on here, and I waited a long time because he's very defensive. But he's making it work. And that's Philip Deneau.
Oh, wow.
Center, 36% owned. Yeah. It's kind of
It's
crazy.
happening again.
It's happening again, but it's been more consistent this time. On ice shooting percentage, IPP, and shooting percentage is all in line. Shooting percentage is actually low over the last 13 games, and yes, he's doing pretty well. His shot totals are super high, so he gives you a ton in that peripheral category. He's playing 20 plus minutes a game now. There's a lot to like about Philip Deneau. He's playing extremely well, driving that offense really well, and he's someone to me that is probably more of a target in deeper leagues, not so much the higher caliber leagues. But for example, he's still available in my keeper league, a 12-person banger keeper league, and it's kind of surprising that he's still there. And again, 36% owned, right? But I feel like in my keeper league, with the way it's set up, Deneau is maybe my favorite center on the wire. And I've seen some other centers picked up, but a lot of people are ignoring Deneau. And so I think that he's someone that I wanted to bring to your attention, because if you are in a deeper league and maybe you're hurting at center, honestly, you're probably not, but if you are, or you have someone who's just kind of underperforming at center, Philip Deneau is a very, very interesting option to take a look at and just see if he fits your mold. And I would say that if he does, if you look at it and everything kind of looks in line for your league, that's where he's sustainably high. And I'd say what we're seeing recently is pretty reliable. Now, the one area of concern is what happens when injuries come back. What happens with Deneau's time then? But they've been playing a lot of minutes all season. His average is like 19 on the season. Recently, it's been more in the 20-minute range. So he's been this player for a while. It's just he wasn't as consistent from a points perspective at the beginning of the year. It was flash in the pan sort of, and then he completely cooled off. And now it's been a few weeks now that he's been far more consistent. And so I'm willing to say that I feel more secure in it now. So
let's move into Sustainably Low then.
I have some big names in Sustainably Low here. I'm gonna make some people real angry.
I have big-ish names, but I don't think I'm gonna rock any boats really.
I'm rocking boats.
The
boats are going to be filling up with water.
My first one is Cam Atkinson, right wing, 61%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we kind of alluded to this a few times when we were talking about Bjorkstrand, and it was basically the worry for either Bjorkstrand or Atkinson is not getting top power play. Makes a pretty big difference, and it's Bjorkstrand, and why would it not be at this point? So Atkinson is relegated essentially to a lesser role. He's still going to be a volume shooter, so he's still going to get you somewhere between 3 and 4 shots a game, which is great. But I don't think that we're going to see the points come back. I think we're going to see him be where he was before his injury, where we were already calling him sustainably low, and he was at about a 55-point pace. I think that sounds about right. If he can't get top power play, can't get top line back, there's just not enough opportunity for him to be able to get a whole lot done. He's going to be probably a goal first player, but I don't really see him doing a whole lot with that deployment, unfortunately.
Let's put it this way, and I think I talked about this on the hot hands for Oliver Bjorkstrand. Bjorkstrand, from a pure deployment perspective, is Cam Atkinson.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's it. Like, that's how you have to think about it. Cam Atkinson is Bjorkstrand now. Maybe a little bit better because Bjorkstrand was on third line for a while, and Atkinson's minutes are still a little higher than when Bjorkstrand was down there. But for the most part, the simplest way to put this is Bjorkstrand is Atkinson. Was Bjorkstrand, and to be fair, Bjorkstrand was ridiculously efficient with the minutes he did have. Atkinson has not had a history of being very efficient on that second power play. He has been recently, but he does not have a history of doing that. Mm-hmm. And so to me, Atkinson is now second fiddle. He is Bjorkstrand, who wasn't worth it before. Bjorkstrand is now Atkinson, who was worth it. That's pretty much that's the simplest way to put it, I think.
Yep.
Oh boy. Okay, you ready to rock the boat? Get ready to fill up with water. You have the buckets.
I don't know.
You know what I mean. Okay. Brent Burns, defenseman, 99% on.
Oh yeah.
Remember when I brought up that Brent Burns, if things go wrong, could be a 50-point defenseman? Yeah, that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
That is happening right now. His shooting percentage is fine over the last 11 games. It's the Sharks in general that's killing him. Because while his IPP is a tad low, it's really just fine.
Yeah.
And his shooting percentage is a tad low, but again, nothing that you'd say, okay, you change this, and all of a sudden Brent Burns is back to point per game pace. The issue is that the Sharks as a whole are just killing him. The Sharks system, the Sharks, with how much they suck, are just killing him. On top of that, he's playing more of a split with Karlsson this year, whereas last year he was the main man on offense, and Karlsson was kind of more of a, let's play him defensive, but also still give him offensive opportunities. But when it came to shots and everything, Karlsson was more of second fiddle. This year, that's more of a split duties, and they're also not giving Burns as many shots. And so the thing is that at the end of the day, they just don't generate enough goals for him to get those points.
He's also hurt.
Dude, that's the thing.
Helping.
He's also hurt, which doesn't help. So probably affects his shooting, right? How much he shoots and how much he wants to shoot. But at the end of the day, even if you're ignoring the shot production and you're looking at just assists that he can get in on, right? And you look at, okay, the on-ice shooting percentage is kind of fine, maybe a little bit low. His IPP is fine. So then why are the points not coming? And when that happens, when you see IPP and on-ice shooting percentage relatively fine, what you point to is just that there's not that many goals to get in on, as there was in the past. And that's the case with the Sharks. They don't score enough goals for which a guy like Brent Burns, who relies on assists more than anything, can actually get in on anything. You look at a guy like John Karlsson, right, where the Washington Capitals are an incredible possession team and get a ton of shots on net, a ton of attempts, score a lot of goals. And so there's just a lot of points to go around, especially for a guy like John Karlsson, who very much is kind of the QB in the offense. Whereas for Brent Burns, there's just not that many goals that he can eventually get in on. That's the thing, and that's what's killing him. So, to me, Brent Burns is a sell. I would absolutely be looking to sell Brent Burns for two reasons. One, I don't buy him for this year. I don't see where in the world the breakout's going to come. I don't see it unless the Sharks magically just decide they know how to score goals and their on-ice shooting percentage goes dramatically up. He's not figuring this out. That's literally the only lever here is not Brent Burns. He has no control over this. The control over this is the team and the system and them scoring goals and figuring it out. And I'm of the opinion now the Sharks suck. If you're of the opinion the Sharks suck, which honestly I think a lot of you are, then you're also of the opinion, unfortunately, that Brent Burns is not going to figure this out. And you may be looking at a 50-point guy. I just traded Brent Burns for Tyler Seguin in a keeper league, and that feels like a steal for me going forward. That's kind of where it is. If he figures it out, fine. But again, you're betting on the Sharks as a whole figuring it out. And I don't want to make that bet right now.
Interesting. Makes me nervous.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I mean, look, and I think that I didn't want to put this take here solely to make people mad or to have a contrary opinion. I really did think hard about this a lot. And I've kind of wanted to put him here for a while, but I really wanted to wait and see what's happening on the Sharks. And I mean, for me, a death sentence for a player like this, like Brent Burns, is when everyone around him is doing poorly as well, right? You see Tomas Hertl being slumped down or brought down. You see Erik Karlsson being brought down. You see just LeBanc. Everybody's being dragged down by the Sharks' inability to control shots, to actually put shots on net, control the puck, and it's killing them. It's absolutely killing them. And at the end of the day, you need goals to happen. The Sharks are the last place team in the league by a wide margin in goals for at even strength. And when you're a guy like Brent Burns, who relies on assists and relies on the team getting points, there's only so much he can do to turn this around.
They're worse than Dallas?
And that's when I lose faith.
Oh, not Dallas. Yeah. Detroit?
Yes.
Really? Detroit's goals for are horrible.
Oh, I know. Well, we're looking at 5-on-5 here.
Yeah.
They do have a much better power play than the Detroit Red Wings, and I'm going to check that to make sure. But when we did the holiday special, it might have changed since then. But when we did the holiday special 5-on-5, San Jose was, and you might hear my mouse clicking here. Apologies for that. We usually try to do this off, but I want to make sure that I'm telling you the right thing. You know what? I'm an idiot. That I should have checked this before. They are not last anymore. They are 26th at 5-on-5, but still not good. It's not that there's only a 20-goal difference between them and Detroit. Their company is the Los Angeles Kings, the Ottawa Senators, the New Jersey Devils, the Dallas Stars, the Anaheim Ducks, and the Detroit Red Wings.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah, So, and look, and at the end of the day, too, the thing with Brent Burns, like we've said, right, the power play split thing was weird. He's injured, not getting as much 5-on-5 time. There's just a lot of things that to me, I'm like, nah, I'm not buying. And to be fair, Tyler Seguin is in the same boat. Okay, like I traded for Tyler Seguin knowing full well that I'm pretty much doing a player swap in which both of them have the same risks attached to them.
Mm-hmm.
The difference for me is that I'd rather, in that kind of a system, bet on a goal scorer who does have a lot more control over their destiny in a way, and that still is shooting a lot and things kind of could be promising, as opposed to a guy who's reliant on the team around him actually finishing. That was my bet essentially.
Okay, moving on. Before I get too sad, my next one is Ivan Provorov. Defense 82%. You know, he's been power play one for a long time now, and it really hasn't made enough of a difference. We're still seeing him be like pretty mediocre from a point perspective. Last season he was 26 points, so that's not good. But he's only sitting at a 41-point pace, which is pretty low considering how good that power play should be. His IPP is low, but I feel like it just is going to be. He's not a big play driver, despite the fact that he's been shooting quite a bit this season. He plays mostly defensive minutes in general. There's not a lot of ways for him to be super fantasy relevant long term, apart from in banger cats leagues and stuff. Like obviously he does. His shots are pretty good. His hits are all right. His blocks are all right. So he's got some value if you're looking at like a total package like that. But the fact that he's 82% owned is just absurd to me. It's way too high. He could be moved off that top power play at any moment as well. I mean, not that I would gamble on that, but I could see Sanheim or even Ghost getting another shot at top power play at some point. But I don't know.
Speaking of defensemen, I have two random ones to mention, if you don't mind. I don't even have them on my list.
Mm-hmm.
Shattenkirk is still like 70+% owned, which is absurd to me. Drop Shattenkirk. Why is anybody holding him at this point? That's one. Two, fun fact, Dimitri from Puck Soup actually posted this on Twitter just a little bit ago, and I saw it, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to share this. Fun fact, while PK Subban has been on the ice for the power play this year, and that's 120 minutes, they've been outscored 4-3.
Wow. Jeez, that's horrible.
How about that stat?
Very bad.
How about that? Also, if you're holding on to PK Subban as well, I don't know what to tell you. You should probably have given up a long time ago, to be honest. Yeah, he's not good. Okay, my next one here is another one that's going to rock the boat. So get your buckets ready. I'm trying to find this tweet too, so I can make sure to quote him properly here. Yes, here's from Dimitri. The New Jersey Devils are now getting outscored 4-3 in the 120 power play minutes PK Subban has been on the ice for this season. Fun. So like I said, get your buckets ready and douse the flames because it's Johnny Gaudreau.
Oh, Jesus
Left wing,
Christ.
right wing, 98%. Oh, that was a good one for him though. I'm proud of that one. That was good. 65-point Johnny Gaudreau, maybe? Probably not. To be fair, probably not. Probably not that low. But there's some things that are very similar to Brent Burns here. Very similar. There's some very concerning things that are worse than Brent Burns, in my opinion. Like, if Brent Burns scares me, Johnny Gaudreau terrifies me. His shooting percentage is pretty low, but considering that it's the Flames, and they were really over-indexed last year, and just all season they've been pretty low, it's not that crazy, actually. It's kind of like Arizona, right? Where you look at it and you're like, well, yeah, it's low for the league, but it's Arizona. So it's not that crazy. And it's kind of like within a standard deviation, like we were saying the other day on the special. It's within a standard deviation of what you'd expect for him. Last year was above. This year is a little bit below. And he's similar to Burns in that his IPP and on-ice shooting percentage aren't that low, and they're not that crazy. The Flames just don't do enough. His IPP is pretty similar to his prior year totals. They just don't do enough. They are also down there with the Sharks and the Stars and the Kings in terms of goals for. So you're looking at a team, again, that just doesn't get that many goals. And what's the biggest problem with Johnny Gaudreau for me? The biggest problem is his loss of ice time. That is what right now for me is the death sentence. The fact that he cannot get out of 17 minutes a game is just a joke. I guess it's a joke on management for doing that, first off, and not figuring it out. And also just sucks for fantasy because if Johnny Gaudreau can't get more than 17 minutes a game, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah,
He's a Philip Forsberg at that. He's a Philip Forsberg at that point with no peripherals. That's
Yeah.
what he is. That's it. He needs the minutes. If he's not getting those minutes, and on top of that, the power play is one of the worst in the league. So you're not looking at power play points to turn this around. They suck at even strength in terms of scoring goals. They're third worst at even strength for goal scoring. They have a terrible shooting percentage. They have all season.
Yeah, I don't know what the
Where
deal is
where is
with
this?
with the Flames. Even less than the
Me neither.
Sharks. I don't know what is going on over there.
Nick, it's so weird. And the resurgence again. It's like Brent Burns. I don't know where it's going to come from. Where's it going to come from? But I don't see it. Could it happen? Absolutely. Would I rather bet on Goudreau than Burns? That's a tough one. Honestly, it all depends on your league. I would do it if it's a points heavy league. I wouldn't do it in a Cats league.
Yeah.
I just think the
He's
risk
not a
is
good
so
Cats
massive.
player in general. He only has one hit on the
No.
season, which is just
One hit on the season, very inconsistent. Points aren't there. To me, Johnny Gaudreau is unfortunately sustainably low, as are pretty much all the Flames, aside from the blocks that Mark Giordano gives you. We are at a point in the season where you need to take stock, in my opinion, of the team composition and accept teams are who they are. Don't try to say, oh, the Sharks are going to be the St. Louis Blues and figure this out at some point, or the Flames are going to pull a Blues. What the Blues did, and I've said this many times this season, but what the Blues did is so ridiculous. Expecting anybody else to do that is absurd. I expect no one to ever do it again, to be honest. And I think that's more reasonable than expecting someone to do it.
definitely.
So at this point, you just got to look at the Flames, look at the Sharks, and say they suck. And with Johnny Gaudreau, the thing that sucks double is that not only do the Flames suck, his deployment sucks. It's just crap on top of crap. And you know what? It doesn't matter how many buckets you pour on him. It's not going to cool him off. He sucks.
I'm not sure
Wait.
if that worked, but
That doesn't work. But you know what? I'm sticking with it. I shamed you last time for the you whatever the hell you said. I'm leaving that in. I'm going to shame myself. Okay. What's your last one here?
my last one is Clayton
Please
Keller.
Take me off screen.
Which,
Oh, we talked.
Yep.
Yes. We previewed a little bit without meaning to.
yeah, I mean, with Connor Garland taking over Clayton Keller's spot, he really has nothing left. Left wing, right wing, 50%. Ice time is dipping and dipping and dipping. He played over 18 minutes a game last season. This season, on the whole, so far, he's playing 16 and a half, and that's even less and less. Over the last month, it's 15 and a half. Over the last 14 days, it's 14 and a half. Yeah, nothing looks good here. Obviously, because he lost power play 1 to Garland, like worst line mates, worst everything. It's bad. There's nothing redeeming here. Like he could easily end this season on like a 40 to 45 point pace. It's I don't want anything to do with him.
Yep. I mean, we haven't wanted anything to do with him for a while now.
Yep.
Oh, and all my sustainably lows are so spicy here. I've got the last one here feels a little bit good. Eric Howla, center left wing, 17% owned.
Oh yeah, he got scratched.
Oh yeah, he got scratched. Minutes have dipped. He's lost that sweet power play percentage. Shooting percentage is finally kind of coming back down to earth. It's dipped over the last 30 days, way too low.
Lost it to Justin Williams, the top power play.
Yeah, his shooting percentage has started to dip, which again, remember that on the season it's really high, so it's going to be interesting if that sticks, but there is some regression here that could happen. Bad on-ice shooting percentage is not really enough to make up for the difference here in these last 30 days. A lot of it is just kind of explained away by, getting scratched and also the minutes dipping and no power play anymore. So he is not relevant, not even as a streamer at the moment. Justin Williams I would rather have Justin Williams than Eric Howell as a streamer.
I'd rather not have either one.
Yeah, me too. But if I had to choose, I'd pick with that one. So there you go. That is our unsustainable episode. Like I said at the beginning, go reach out to people. Tell them you care about them and don't be ashamed for it. Every single person I've reached out to people that I haven't talked to in years, and every single one has appreciated it. So I can promise you that maybe not everybody, but if you reach out, more often than not, people will be very appreciative of you checking in on them for whatever reason, not just Kobe. So thank you for watching or listening. We'll catch you next time.
Yep. Thanks for listening.